Hello and welcome to PlayStation Grenade. Marvel's Spider-Man on the PS4 is looking like a contender for the greatest superhero video game ever, with elements of the Batman Arkham series, Infamous, and the brilliant Spider-Man 2 from back in the PS2 days. As more villains and supervillains are announced, I thought we should have a look at them before we face them on the PS4. We'll be looking at their skill set, their superpowers, as well as the brief origin story for each character. Keep in mind, many characters have received countless updates and their backstories have been reimagined, especially in the films. So I decided to keep to the first version of each character, keeping faithful to the first iteration where possible. Let's start with the man who's got the most airtime over the last year, Mr. Negative, aka Martin Lee.
Martin Lee?
This character has been in the Marvel Universe for about 10 years now and resembles a sort of Jekyll and Hyde character. Let's break him down. Mr. Negative's origins are harrowing, as he was part of a slave trafficking organisation that crashed on the American shoreline. Mr. Negative took the name Martin Lee from one of the dead slaves on board to hide himself and his wrongdoings, only to be captured by the Magia gang. He suffered torture and testing upon using various drugs, which cut his psyche into two. After escaping, Martin Lee opened soup kitchens around New York in the hopes of helping others. He eventually found that his physical touch could heal others. In the comic books, Lee saved Eddie Brock with one touch, completely eradicating his terminal cancer. But Lee's negative emotions took the form of Mr. Negative, who became an evil crime lord. Oh, and the healing touch he has? That becomes a deadly electrical charge when in this form. In addition to this, his touch allows him to control the thoughts of others. He even controlled Spider-Man for a brief period in the comic books. Mr. Negative controls a huge army he calls the Inner Demons, who will make up a huge portion of the grunts we battle in the game. Next on our supervillain hit list is the Shocker.
Herman! Long time no see. Hey, I'm no lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's a parole violation.
Herman Schultz first showed up in the Marvel Universe back in 1967. He's a bank robber, but he wasn't very good at his job. He spent countless years behind bars. Whilst there, Herman designed a tool which used high-frequency waves to shock open safes and bank vaults. He went on to weaponize this to allow him to blow holes through walls and punch his enemies so hard he could stop their heart on impact. Going back to his time in prison for a moment, the first time he used that device, he intended to make a small hole in his cell to escape, but he actually knocked down the entire prison block. He somehow survived and perfected his design to include a protective suit and these gauntlets too to control the waves of power. And that's when Herman renamed himself to the Shocker. So we've already looked at an underworld mastermind and a specialised bank robber. Let's dumb things down a little with Rhino. Without a doubt, Rhino is depicted as the dumbest villain in Spider-Man history.
Oh, hi, Rhino!
Hope you like surprise, Spider!
Surprise? What is he talking about?
Alexei Sitovich, I'm so sorry for butchering that, was a low-level thug in the Russian mafia. With zero education and little physical skill to fall back on, Alexei basically just punched people for a living. But what he really wanted was to bring his family to America, but couldn't afford to do so. So to raise the cash he needed, he agreed to be tested upon by scientists in the hope of creating an unstoppable right-hand man for the mafia. The results were successful, as the suit, which was bonded to his skin, and subsequent injections gave him the force and power of a rhinoceros. The suit was augmented to reflect the name, and now Rhino has arrived. Rhino hasn't been hugely loyal in the past, first turning on his creators, but eventually he did team up with other criminals to become a supervillain supergroup, like a boy band. Physically, he's one of the strongest opponents to face Spider-Man, but tactically, he's a bit of an idiot. He might be portrayed differently in Spider-Man PS4. We shall have to wait and see.
We definitely want to!
Let's look at the Vulture next.
Vulture! What?
Long time no see! We're going to have so much fun!
Sorry, no time to talk!
Back in 1963, Adrian Toomes was introduced as a brilliant electronic engineer with a fixation on flying. He was so fixated on achieving this goal that he never realised his business partner has scammed him out of his own company. Forced out of his own organisation, Toomes retreated to his farm on Staten Island and spent his days perfecting his electromagnetic flying harness. Once complete, the suit also gave him supervillain strength, of course. Now he's fixated on revenge upon the corporate vultures that took his company. Adrian customised his suit to reflect that hatred and became the Vulture. He attempted to kill his old partner only to be defeated by Spider-Man and thrown into prison.
Sorry, old-timer. Your flying days are over. Cops will be here soon to gather you up and put you back in the coop. Coop? I'm on a roll.
He's pretty old. His age makes him a senior citizen, but the Vulture suit keeps him on equal footing with Spider-Man, and his ability to make and create weapons on the fly can keep him one step ahead of the web slinger. Let's talk about Electro. Not that one, although I have to admit I quite like this version of Electro. The original Electro was depicted in the 1960s and looked like this. Definitely time for a redesign. In Spider-Man on PS4, he looks like this.
Welcome to the party, just in time for the fireworks.
Electro started life as Max Dillon, another electrical engineer, just like Vulture. But Max didn't have his own mega corporation. No, he worked as a low-level lineman, responsible for fixing and maintaining electrical power lines. Little did he know that he had a mutation in his body which lay dormant. Dormant until the day Max was hit by lightning whilst working. He suddenly became capable of controlling electronic devices, kinda like a living electrical capacitor. On top of that, he also gained the ability to generate electricity at will to fire blasts from his fingertips. To build up his power, Electro began stealing technology from Tony Stark, until the day he was finally strong enough and revealed himself as Electro. Spider-Man has had many run-ins with Electro, but struggled to make contact with Max due to the electric shock he'd suffer. In the comics, Spider-Man wore rubber gloves to defeat Electro. I dare say we probably won't be defeating him like that on the PS4. Not all the villains in Marvel Spider-Man are male. Black Cat has also been confirmed, although mainly in DLC form. Oh, by the way, this footage is from Spider-Man Web of Shadows from 2008. Black Cat first appeared back in 1979. Her real name is Felicia Hardy, the daughter of world-renowned cat burglar Walter Hardy. Well, Flick decided to follow in her daddy's footsteps, as her Black Cat identity suggests. She doesn't really have any supervillain attributes, but she is a highly skilled acrobat and is versed in many forms of martial art. Spider-Man has forgotten she's just a regular human in the past. If you've ever played Web of Shadows, in that game it's possible for Peter to throw Cat from the top of a building and well, see for yourself.
Cat! Oh God!
Alternately, he can also do this.
Gotcha!
I'm getting sidetracked. Let's crack on. Black Cat has regularly been a love interest for Spidey, sometimes making her an ally as well as an enemy.
Really? Well, guess what? I do. I still love you.
Next, let's look at Scorpion.
Scorpion wins.
Wrong Scorpion. Our Marvel Scorpion first appeared back in 1962, but it's the 1964 iteration that we're going to look at, as that happened within the Spidey timeline. Mac Garvin was a private investigator who was hired to follow Peter Parker to find out how he took such great photos of Spider-Man. Peter avoided him with ease, so that didn't work, so instead of letting it go, Gargan took part in an experiment to become the only creature capable of defeating a spider, a scorpion. The experiment went perfectly like always, with Mac gaining superhero levels of speed, strength and Scorpion-esque reflexes. He can also walk up walls or hang from roofs, you know, just like Spider-Man. Scorpion even has a spider sense, but of course it's Scorpion sense instead. All those attributes make him Spider-Man's equal in every way on the battlefield, but to give him the edge, a mechanical tail was grafted to his suit. Well, I hope it's his suit and not his anus. Scorpion has a fixation on killing Peter's boss, J. Jonah Jameson, who both hired him to follow Peter around and convinced him to become the Scorpion. Let's look at Taskmaster, as he'll be testing us throughout the game within side missions. In one scenario, Spider-Man will need to encase a bomb in webbing quickly or risk the entire neighbourhood becoming vaporised. The other missions are promised to be completely different, as the Taskmaster, aka Tony Masters, has a very unique skill set known as photographic reflexes. Tony has the ability to mimic any movement he witnesses. Okay, that doesn't sound like a superpower, but it really is. Over time, Taskmaster learned every single move from every single superhero and villain. He obviously couldn't use their superpowers, but by studying them in different scenarios, he was able to predict their actions and stay one step ahead of his foes. So how the heck do you fight someone who knows your every move and reaction? Kingpin is yet another supervillain confirmed in Marvel Spider-Man. Early on in the game, we'll be bringing Kingpin, aka Wilson Fisk, to justice, but this will only be the beginning. Kingpin is a mob overlord, and as his name suggests, he's the criminal Kingpin. If you remember Mr. Negative from earlier, it's highly likely the two mob bosses are in a war, hence why Kingpin will be helping Spider-Man from behind bars. Back in 1967, the Kingpin emerged after Peter Parker quit his Spider-Man persona. At this point, Kingpin was attempting to become a legitimate businessman, but he saw the Daily Bugle as the opposition and decided to silence Jonah Jameson. Spider-Man once again donned his mask to rescue Jameson, but found that the Kingpin wasn't a rotund blob. He was actually 350 pounds of muscle. The Kingpin went on to defeat Spider-Man that day, but his obsession with death traps, like many Bond villains, saw Spider-Man escape, and once again Wilson Fisk was flushed back down into the criminal underworld. So there we go, that's the first 9 supervillains confirmed for Spider-Man on the PS4, but many others such as Harry and Norman Osborn will be in the game, and Doc Ock looks almost certain to be here too, but I don't want to talk about those without any concrete evidence, so we'll wrap things up here for episode 1, but rest assured, as soon as more villains and supervillains are announced, I'll come back and we'll break down their powers, their motivations, and their origins. I'm Adam from PlayStation Grenade, it's been good to geek out with you, I'll see you next time.